It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And we have 3 episodes remaining for 2025, including this one. We did the big one last week, top 48s. We ran through the whole class, top to bottom, 4 full rounds. It feels like, when that happens, the end is certainly near, but we're not quite done yet. There are a few very important groups of players that we have to talk about before we skedaddle. And one of those groups is IDPs, because they're people too.
They're absolutely people too. They deserve their own episode. They deserve to be spotlighted for this entire time. We're going to do we each have a list of 20 ranked, so we'll go through in depth. If you're playing an IDP league, if you're playing, whether you have cornerbacks, whether you have just one IDP on your roster, we got something to cover all the bases, I'd say.
Yeah, stay tuned to the very end of this one for a very interesting philosophical conversation. If you are one of the leagues that is required to start a cornerback, which is not you if you're on sleeper, because for some reason, the new biggest fantasy platform on the planet has still yet to figure out that we should have defensive tackles and cornerbacks as options to play in the game.
It's like so customizable.
Right.
I don't understand how you can't just be like, yeah, you can throw a cornerback in there.
And they clearly have the positional breakouts, because the dots are different colors sometimes for the DBs.
Well, they say CB underneath them.
Yeah.
If you go onto their player page.
I don't get it. Maybe I have to try start trying, but then try even harder to reach them and be like, what are you doing? Please, it takes 5, it has to take 5 seconds, right? That's how
I would have
an app works. Yeah.
CB, just make that and then sort eligible by people with CB. I don't know. So, but yeah, if you're X18X Fearless, you commented on our last video, we'll cover that towards the end of this one when we talk about the player you referenced.
Yes, we will. And so these are our scoring settings. If you've been with us before, you might understand already how we do this. If you are new, welcome. And
we love you.
We do. And our scoring settings are in the description of this episode. So what you will find if you check that out is that defensive linemen, tier 1 edge, are going to be the most valuable players here in our format. We do not require cornerbacks. We do not require defensive tackles. So that is out of the equation. I think I will spoil it for both of us and say you will not hear about a single position cornerback on this list today. No? Did I? Okay. Oh, whoa. Okay.
All right. We'll see.
We'll see.
I don't know if he's only going to play corner, but I think,
All right. Well, I got ahead of myself.
Played cornerback.
All right. I'm getting ahead of myself here again. I love to do that. But so scoring settings are down there, but we are going to run through our top 20s with those scoring settings right now here today. So let's just dive into it, because we have a lot of IDPs to talk about. And I'm going to turn it over to you to give me your number 20 IDP.
Here's a cornerback. Jahdae Barron.
Okay.
On the Broncos. If you were with us last year, this is kind of my Mike Sanders still of this year, where I'm I don't 100% know how fantasy relevant he can be, but in the right system, he can be fantasy relevant. And I think this Broncos defense is really interesting. I think you have, a lot of good players on this defense, and Jahdae Barron is an aggressive slot corner. He can play downhill. He can fill gaps. He's a good run defender. I think he can absolutely be a playmaker. You get your, nose dirty and get near the line of scrimmage, maybe get a couple sacks coming off the edge on those like corner blitzes. I think he can be that kind of guy with some splash plays here and there. I don't know if he's like going to be as lucrative as like Witherspoon was a couple years ago, but I still think that he can mix it up a little bit as a slot corner and rack up a good amount of tackles.
Yeah, I mean, I do this every year, and I always leave cornerback off of this list, and there will always be a cornerback that emerges as a rookie that's relevant. Like last year was Sanderstill. He was one of the most productive rookie DBs, period. So he was definitely on the radar. And the year before that with Devon Witherspoon, like he's still very relevant today. So I think I always ignore the cornerback position just because it's really hard to anticipate, what it's going to look like. But I think with these nickel type corners, that's where you can find the real value. And I don't know that Barron is going to be playing exclusively in the slot for the Broncos, but I would expect him to live there, at least part of the time. And what's interesting about Jahdae Barron is that he was actually 7th among all cornerbacks in college football last year in tackles. He had 57 solo tackles last year. So there was tackle numbers for this player in college at the college level. Yes, they, some of that is factoring in with the playoff run that Texas had with the playoff game. So, but regardless, maybe I am doing a disservice here by just ignoring Jahdae Barron. Maybe we'll talk about this a year from now.
I think he's also going to be awarded a lot of flexibility since they have probably the best corner in the league in Pat Surtain. And so he has the ability to float around a lot because he's not going to have to guard their best player under like pretty much any circumstance.
So my number 20 player is a player that has been around for a while at Camp Dynasty. It's JT Tuimoloau.
He's my 18.
18? Okay.
Yep.
So Tuimoloau, I think we talked about maybe more last year, anticipating that he would come out in the 2024 draft, and he opted to come back. And it was a great decision for him because he ended up having a career season. Finally, the recruiting pedigree with being a 5-star player and the flashes that we saw, obviously we remember that first moment against Penn State where he kind of broke out and put his name out there. And it was like, oh my God, this is the guy, he's doing the thing. So that's why we expected that, last season, 2 years ago now, would have been the year where this sort of thing happened, where he had 12 sacks and or 15 sacks according to PFF, because we use PFF numbers here and they like to juice the sack numbers. But 51 pressures, 15 sacks this last year at Ohio State. Obviously, we talked a little bit about him, but not a ton this year. This is kind of a high motor pass rusher, not the longest guy. He's, not the most ideal measurables in that regard, but high motor. And now we get some high end production to match his traits as well. So he went 45th in the draft to the Colts, high second round to the Colts. Obviously, we know last year, Leatu Latu was the first-round pick for the Colts. He was your IDP 1 in the entire class. He was my IDP 2. We expect him to, take an even bigger step forward in year 2 in the NFL. But Tuimoloau has a chance to stand out, I think, in this room. There are a lot of names here, and we talked about that last year with Latu as well. Like, there are definitely some names, but Kwity Paye, I feel like we're reaching a point now where it's like Kwity Paye just is what he is, and he's not really spectacular. And Samson Ebukam is also just fine. And so I think Tuimoloau maybe doesn't get a ton of run this year, but I think he's a player that's worth stashing for the future.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think he might not have like the highest ceiling, which is why he ends up down towards the bottom of the list. But I think he's, like you said, a very high effort, high motor player, a guy that is like always in passing lanes, making plays, aggressively attacking his the O lineman in front of him and fighting to chase things down, which is always valuable because you can have a D end that gets 14 sacks in a season, but if he doesn't get any tackles because he's not chasing down running backs, it doesn't amount to a whole lot. So I think that this is a guy that could have, if he ends up being a starter on this Colts team, on the opposite side from Latu or a heavy rotational piece, he could definitely add some value.
So number 19 for you.
Danny Stutsman.
Okay.
Do you have him?
I have him higher.
Okay.
Let's see. I didn't put numbers on this. Why did I not put numbers on this document?
Didn't put rankings on your rankings.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, tell me what you like about Stutsman.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where I have him.
So Stutsman went to the Saints at 410, which is one of the biggest things I like about him, because I don't, I think they still have Demario Davis. I think they're still trotting him out there. Pete Werner is in that room also. But I think Stutsman could carve a role in that linebacker room sooner rather than later, whether that's this year or like pretty soon in the future. Because while Demario Davis is ageless, I don't know if I've talked about this a lot with the Saints. I don't know if he's like long for this roster because they're very clearly going through like a complete overhaul. And like, I think they maybe should even attack that more aggressively, but Derek Carr just retired from football, so they're going to be, they get out of that, basically, kind of get out of jail free for them. Good for both of them, I guess, the kind of a toxic situation all around. But they're going to need to overhaul this roster altogether, and I could see Stutsman being a linebacker that is, just a model of consistency for this room. And while not going to be Demario Davis, it can still be a really good contributor that racks up good tackle numbers and ends up being, just what you need out of an IDP guy, which is plays a lot of downs and gets a lot of tackles.
Yeah, I have Stutsman at 14 because I just really like his game from an IDP perspective. This is a player that we've talked about in the past. I believe he was one of our higher rated players on 2.0. And that was just because, 3-year starter at Oklahoma. He's had over 100 tackles for the last 3 years. So his name's been on our radar for a while now as an IDP, a potential IDP linebacker. A career total 171 stops for Oklahoma. That's kind of, they don't have tackles for loss, but they have the stops metric instead. Not all of those are tackles for loss, but same sort of idea of stifling plays. And that is what Danny Stutsman does well. He's very, very good against the run, moving downhill. He's sort of the quintessential downhill linebacker with athleticism. 90.9 run defense grade in 2024, which was a career high and one of the highest marks in college football. The problem with Stutsman is, will his ability or lack thereof in coverage get him off the field? Because this season in 2024, he's setting a career best in terms of run defense grade, but he is setting a career low in coverage grade. And that is something that has, he's never been really a dominant or even good player in coverage in college, but this year bottoming out 46.3 coverage grade from PFF. So they took him in the 4th round. 112 overall. Like you mentioned, Demario Davis is still there. And I feel like for years and years and years, it's been like, this has got to stop at some point. And he keeps being an IDP.
Can't keep getting away with this.
He keeps being a relevant IDP linebacker, but eventually Father Time, or just like you said, they're just going to cut him at some point as well. If he keeps producing, it doesn't really matter.
They're going to have to.
Right. So I do think there is you could talk yourself into Danny Stutsman being the future of the Mike position for the Saints. And I think that is why I have him up here at 14. Because I think if he manages to develop and get into that role down the line, it's going to be a very productive role for fantasy, both given, we have kind of this context of Demario Davis putting up these incredible numbers there for so long. Stutsman has the profile of an IDP relevant linebacker, but it'll be up to him if he can stay on the field long enough to do that.
Right.
All right. So then
number 19.
Number 19, and I have them numbered now, so I'm not going to mix this up at all. And I have a linebacker here as well. I have Chris Paul Jr.
Okay. I didn't make my list.
Chris Paul Jr., not the son of Chris Paul, the NBA player. Just want to clear that up.
I was wondering.
We're all going to ask the question at some
Ages
point.
line up. Chris Paul is about 40,
Yeah, like I mean,
19-year-old, 20-year-old.
I think he should just start telling people that Chris Paul is his dad. It's like, oh yeah, no,
probably the same height.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's okay. So that's the thing. Chris Paul Jr., undersized linebacker. He's coming in at 222 pounds. Now we've talked. We've talked at length about size at the linebacker position in the NFL. We understand that linebackers are getting smaller. Even in a world where people were trying to tell you the linebacker class last year was too small, we're now finding out that every single class is going to be this size. 235 is the new prototype, I would say. I feel like 235 is kind of the number that a lot of these guys are coming in around. So for a player like this coming in at 222, yes, linebackers are getting smaller. Yes, there are linebackers at the NFL level right now that are playing around 225, and it's working for them. So I'm not saying that he can't do it, but he is undersized, even in this new world. So that is part of this, why he's further down the list. The other part is that he's a 5th round draft selection, but to the Rams. So 172 overall to the Rams. And last year, the Rams linebacker room was like one of the biggest IDP conversations preseason because everyone was trying to figure out once Ernest Jones got traded, what was going to happen. And
then they had the worst linebackers in the league.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody was looking at the UDFA Omar Spates and sticking him on their taxi. It's me. I'm looking in the mirror and thinking this is going to be, the next Ernest Jones or something. Obviously Ernest Jones was a 3rd round pick, not a UDFA. But I think in this case, I'm looking at Chris Paul as a player that can step into this room, and even as a 5th round pick.
I can't.
I know.
It's so odd to call an NFL player Chris Paul.
Yeah, see, he should have went to the Saints. He should have been back to New Orleans.
Ooh, I would have liked that.
But he is in LA, and I think he has a legitimate chance to get snaps this year. He has, I think, talent that exceeds his 5th round draft capital. He had an amazing season this year at Ole Miss. It was his first year there. 3 seasons at Arkansas, transferred to Ole Miss ahead of this year, had 85 total tackles. Only missed 4 tackles on the year. That was 4.5%. That is exceptionally low, especially when you consider that he is an undersized player. And along with that, 24 pressures, 6 sacks, and he was the 6th highest graded linebacker for PFF this year in terms of overall defensive grade. So he had an incredible season for Ole Miss. He had a lot of fans in the draft process. I think a lot of people were surprised that he fell deeper into day 3, but he may have fell to a spot that allows him to be fantasy relevant at the end of the day.
This had never happened in David Stern's NBA. Chris Paul going to LA. We're cutting that off.
Well, what a saga that was.
What a world they were living in. I'm worried about the weight, I guess, a little more. I was listening to a press conference from Jeff Hafley talking about Edgerrin Cooper. And then he's like, yeah, Edgerrin Cooper knew that he needed to bulk up in the offseason because it's just really hard to handle all of the beatings that you take. And he was, 230, 235, said he bulked up to 240. And that's kind of where we used to expect these linebackers to weigh in at, and then kind of readjusted our expectations to 235. And it's like, I mean, if you're going to be, coming downhill play after play after play, laying the boom play after play after play, like I'd like you to be at least 235. And like, if he gets up there, that's great. And the opportunity is absolutely there. But I guess I'm just a little, vigilant of like the 220s. That feels a little low for me.
Well, and it's also interesting because we've seen this happen over time because of the passing game and linebackers needing to be smaller, more athletic. Now the run game coming back into style.
Right.
Are we going to see, 240 plus linebackers get back into vogue to counteract that? So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years, how the position changes. But that's, I'm not going to say it's not a concern for me as well. That's why he's here at number 19. These certainly at this range, like 20 IDPs, these are going to be guys that are star them. Yeah, star them. Keep an eye on them. I'm not taking Chris Paul in my comp, like a 5th round sort of comp picks. Like that's not what I'm doing here. This is more of a keep your eye on him, see what the reports are through camp.
Yeah.
Number 18 for you.
For you?
For me.
Yeah, mine's JT Tuimoloau.
That's right.
Yep.
We're already doing the thing. I'm curious if you have this player higher. Okay. Nic Martin?
I do.
Okay.
I have him at 16.
Okay. Do you remember Nic Martin, right?
I remember Nic Martin.
Nic Martin badge getter at Camp Dynasty.
It's been a while, but yeah.
Yeah. I love to call that back because IDPs don't get a ton of badges for us during the season, but Nic Martin being one of the IDPs that got a badge is still like that just kind of rocks my world. And he was a 3rd round pick. Like he got the draft capital that you're kind of looking for with a linebacker. What's interesting about that is that we're talking about an undersized player with Chris Paul Jr. Nic Martin is even smaller because he's shorter. So he's 5'11", 221.
At the combine, he measured in at 6'1", 234. That's on the 49ers page. That's what they have listed. Unless they're doing propaganda on there.
I mean, they very well could be doing propaganda.
But it says at the NFL Combine clocked in at 6'1", 234. Which is why he's not lower on my list.
Let's get to the bottom of it. Am I spreading misinformation?
I think so.
NFL.
Did you use Google AI? Is that what happened?
Would never. So NFL, this is weird. This is really weird because NFL.com, the Lance Zierlein report for Nic Martin says that he is 5'11 and a half, 221 pounds.
That's a big difference.
So that is a massive difference. And so there is misinformation being spread by somebody, and it is probably John Lynch.
I was going to say, I don't think. Well, it's the combine. You can't really fake though. You can't fake 6'1" at the combine.
But that's what's so weird is like if that was what he measured in at the combine, that should be reflected on this page because this is where all of the combine numbers are. His 40s here.
I'm gonna go to an unbiased source.
Yeah.
But tell me what you like about Nic Martin while I do that.
So there's questions about the size, obviously. I mean, I don't know if it's 230s or what, but he was a smaller player. I mean, I think it's very clear when you watch him at Oklahoma State that he is a smaller linebacker, but he is, shot out of a cannon because he is smaller and he has this incredible acceleration and burst. And I think that's kind of what the 49ers gravitated toward with this player. Like if he is smaller, they felt comfortable taking him in the third round at pick 75 because of his athleticism and because of his production, his playmaking ability. I mean, he missed most of this last season, 2024, with a knee injury, but 2023, when he got a badge here at Camp Dynasty, he had an incredible season, 139 total tackles, 6 sacks. I mean, he was ultra productive for the Cowboys during the 2023 season. So I kind of look at this as the 49ers are seeing a player that's measuring in similar to Dre Greenlaw, a player that, has this hybrid body type, great athlete, and they're seeing a player that they can mold into, a Greenlaw-esque linebacker, next to Fred Warner.
I looked up from CBS Sports has a list of all combine measurements.
Okay.
And both them and RAS have him at 5'11", 221. So it's just direct propaganda on the 49ers website. Like legitimate, straight up, just a lie.
Yeah.
Because I was like 6'1", 234. Like that's perfect. But the positives that you pointed out, he'd probably be a little lower on my list about it. But anyway, the positives you pointed out is where I'm at too. It's like if he can slot in next to Fred Warner and just play that Greenlaw role, because Greenlaw's in Denver now, then that's like totally fantasy relevant, 100%. And I think he's a good player. Like you said, he's a little undersized. He plays that way. He looks that way. But I think that plays to his benefit in a lot of situations where he can kind of fly around and he can be the athlete that he is. And I think that's all good stuff. Being undersized, get a little meat on the bones, maybe get to the chiropractor a little bit, get up to that 6'1". Maybe it's a little bit of 6'1" in shoes, 230 with pads on, but yeah, that's messed up.
John Lynch saw everybody roasting that pick for being overdrafted because it was very commonly seen as an overdraft, and was like, put him, who's ever running the site, you better put 2-3, and I don't care what comes after it. But
make it believable. But.
All right, so your number 17.
My number 17 is Xavier Watts.
Oh, okay.
You don't have him on here, right?
He did not make my 20. He's just outside of it.
Yeah. So Xavier Watts, Notre Dame to the Falcons. He got picked in the 3rd round. And I think that he's just a really interesting player, really rangy safety that can do a ton of different things. He's 5'11", 205. So he's got the size to be a hitting safety. He has a decent amount of interceptions. He's forced a couple fumbles. He's just like a kind of do-it-all safety out of Notre Dame, and he gets to play alongside one of the best safeties in the league with Jesse Bates in there too. So he doesn't have to worry about covering the top of the defense, which I think is a role that you don't want your safety to be doing, unless it is like Jesse Bates, who will produce fantasy value for you regardless of the job he's doing. But when you're looking for safeties in the IDP business, you're generally staying away from the traditional free safety, the guy that's going to be covering up, putting band-aids on the deep ball and making sure that nothing's getting behind him, because they're not up in the box. They're not making tackles. They're not getting assisted tackles. They're not, doing all the dirty work that you want your guys to be doing. So Watts, I think, will have the freedom to be able to do that should he secure that starting safety role across from Bates.
Yeah, I did. I left some of the DBs, the flyer DBs, out of my 20, but they are just outside of it. I don't know if do you have Kevin Winston Jr. higher on your list?
Mm-mm.
So I have Kevin Winston Jr. Ahead of Xavier Watts, but I have those two players like right next to each other and right outside of my top 20. Watts, a player, I mean, you said it, kind of a do-it-all player, incredible ball production for him, 13 interceptions over the last 2 seasons, had 6 this year. That goes along with, over 80 tackles for Notre Dame this year as well. So a lot of production on the stat sheet for him in college, and obviously a 3rd-round pick for Atlanta. And so a player that I would expect to see the field for them. We'll see what it looks like, but definitely has the makings of a player that's worth keeping your eyes on for a DB. All right, 17 for me. I am just really married to these linebacker flyers in this class.
I like it.
I'll tell you that. 17 is Teddye Buchanan.
Okay, he's off my list.
So Teddye Buchanan.
Great name, by the way.
Incredible name. Like, incredible name. 4th-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens.
Probably going to be a good player.
Right. That's the thing. 129 to the Ravens. Now, we look at the Ravens, and 2 years ago, I was probably sitting on this very show and telling you that Trenton Simpson was the next big thing. Patrick Queen was going to leave. It was going to be Roquan and Trenton Simpson. And now 2 years later, I'm telling you, Trenton Simpson is replaceable. And Teddye Buchanan is the next big thing.
The replacement.
Yeah.
Same size, too.
Really? I mean, yeah. So Buchanan, we're talking about a few of these smaller linebackers. Buchanan's coming in at a little bit of the, new prototypical size into the 230s for him. 1-year FBS starter at Cal. He spent 4 years at UC Davis before transferring there to Cal in 2024. He led Cal in tackles this last season. Player that I kind of watched a little bit of him, just familiarized myself with his game, and then I just kind of kept watching more. He's just such a fun linebacker to watch. Great instincts, great tackler, leading tackler, like I said, and to go with a sub 10% missed tackle rate. He also has a blitzing skill set. 25 pressures, 6 sacks in 2024. A lot of that is coming up the middle on stunts and delayed rushes. But that is definitely a skill set that he possesses, and he's also a turnover creator and when he's blitzing, getting his hands on the quarterback, he knows how to find the ball and punch it out. He had 3 forced fumbles this last season that was tied for 3rd amongst linebackers in college football. So I think he was really productive. He's kind of maybe a little bit under the radar just because he is a 1-year FBS player, but I think he has a lot of skill and a lot of talent and could legitimately take over for like what we thought Trenton Simpson was going to do. Patrick Queen is in fact gone for years now. Simpson has not grabbed hold of that. The opportunity is there for Buchanan this year.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be opportunity, which I like. I don't know if he's going to seize a role from Simpson this year. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen, but like with some development, I think like he could be that guy. I don't love him at the point of attack. I think that was my biggest thing, is it feels like it takes a little bit for him to shed blocks if they get their hands on him. Makes up for that with his processing and his quickness. So like he can beat blockers to the spot. So it's just like, will that translate? Will the speed and like him being ahead of the game be an NFL skill, or is that a college skill? And that's where I kind of got hung up with him.
Yeah, that's totally valid. That's absolutely valid. And I will say this, I am a sucker for motor IDPs.
Yeah.
I will always bet on guys that show you that they have a high motor and a high intensity on the field. And he is certainly one of those players. So
he's a pretty good zone coverage linebacker too, which says a lot, because a lot of the guys we talk about are, these guys can stuff running lanes, but struggle in zone. And those guys, usually it takes them a while to see the field, because I mean, if you can't drop back into zone when you notice it's play action, you're kind of in trouble.
Number 16 for you,
Nick Martin, who's
okay.
13 pounds lighter than I thought he was.
I mean, honestly, I feel like we're probably still lower than a lot of people are on Martin just because he was a 3rd-round pick. But
Right.
I mean, there's only so far I can go with a player that's that size. But okay, so 16 for you is Martin. So I'll just keep rolling with these linebackers, man. I'm just going to keep on plugging away, throwing the darts at the board. But this one is going to lead this tier. This is where a tier breaks off for me. The next tier is going to be guys that I'm legitimately thinking about if you have like round 5, 6 sort of drafts. But this is Cody Simon at 16. Did he make your 20?
He's off my list.
So Simon really does fit into this same bucket with players like Buchanan, Nick Martin, Chris Paul. Like a lot of these guys are just, there's potential opportunity there. In some cases, it's a little bit more direct than others. And I think in Simon's case, this is the clearest path to getting on the field as early as 2025. This is a 4th-round pick from Ohio State, went to the Cardinals at pick 115. So he led Ohio State in tackles in 2024. He was the defensive MVP of the Rose Bowl and the national title game, a 5th highest defensive PFF grade among linebackers this year. I mean, this was a real, huge year for him. He's had a couple of good years back-to-back here, but this was the real one that kind of broke out for him. He took over as the leader of this defense and one of the best players on this defense. Very instinctual linebacker, again, here with some blitzing upside, similar to Buchanan in that way. For him, it was 20 pressures, 8 sacks this year. A lot of that coming in the same way. It's coming up the middle for him. Not super twitchy. Like I think Buchanan, if we're going to compare these two here next to each other on my list, I think Buchanan a little more twitchy, a little bit better of an athlete. So that's going to be the one area with Simon that I'm a little bit curious to see. Will the speed of the game kind of affect him more than some of these more athletic players? But I think with the instincts, with the pedigree, playing in a national title program like Ohio State, obviously playing against, supreme competition and becoming one of the best defensive players on that team, I think this Cardinals linebacker room is just wide open for the taking for a player like this. I mean, Kaiser White is gone. They signed Akeem Davis Gauthier. I don't know if I'm saying that right. IDP players may remember the ADG from his brief stint at the end of the season, filling in for the Bengals. He was the Logan Wilson fill-in that was very IDP relevant at the end of the season, but he is now on a smaller deal with Arizona, and Mac Wilson's still there, but incredibly replaceable player. So I think the opportunity is there for him. That's the big word here. That was the drinking game last year, was opportunity. I'm going to keep saying it. And with Simon, he's at the top of the list.
Yeah, I think that this was a player that I thought, it makes me nervous when you don't start a lot of games in college. He started 15 of 44 games in his college career. And it just kind of reminded me of Van Ness a little bit, where we came in and it's like, man, he has these tools, he has these abilities. Van Ness was highly touted, which I don't know if I agreed with at the time, and I still don't really agree with it, but that's hindsight's 2020. But also it felt like he missed a few tackles here and there. Again, like similar complaint where once O lineman gets their hands on him, it felt like he's kind of obviously not shit out of luck all the time, but it felt like he struggled to shed those blockers. And if you're consistently like a pulling guards getting to the second level, and once he gets his hands on you, it's like you're kind of cooked. Don't love that. I feel like you're, as a primarily a run defender like Simon is, it becomes a little murky for me for you to see consistent starting level snaps, which is what it takes to be a consistent IDP contributor. So those are the reasons that I left him off my 20.
All right. So my run of dart throw linebackers is officially over, but we will jump to your number 15 player.
So my number 15 player is Walter Nolen. Walter
Okay.
Nolen to the Cardinals. Do you have him?
I do not.
Okay. So Walter Nolen went number 16 to the Cardinals. He's a defensive lineman, defensive tackle. And if you've been here long enough, you know that I like interior D linemen more than Austin does. And that's just going to show up in these ways as we go. Usually I'm on the wrong side of this. So like maybe you should take his advice more than mine.
You were on the right side with Jalen Carter, I'll tell you that.
Well, that one was a little easier than most. But I think Nolen, explosive first step. He gets off the line in a hurry, can beat a lineman to the spot, and kind of dictate how that engagement's going to go. Uses his frame well, I think. Gets low. He's a compact guy. He's not like one of these big, house D tackles. He's 305, which is not small, but he's kind of wears it well, I guess you would say. That's what people say about me. They're like, oh, you wear it well. But yeah, I think he wins with leverage. He kind of understands the zone run, which is really good because he kind of feels it out and then sheds the right way. A lot of the time he's diagnosing, he's not just rushing. And he's just a nasty, he's just has that like nasty demeanor where he is like gonna beat the guy across from him. And so whether or not he's going to be a consistent IDP, I don't know, but it's just the kind of player I want to bet on.
Yeah, Nolen, I these D tackles, you said it, you know me. I fade them in the same way that I fade corners, but not quite as hard because I do have Nolen and some of the other D tackles just banging on the doorstep of my top 20. I just, I prioritized the, potential opportunities that were available for linebackers later in this over going with some of the more prolific interior players, just because for me, I feel like if you're not Jalen Carter, it's really hard for me to talk myself into you until I've seen it. Like, and that might come at the expense of like battling it out on waivers. But I mean, I really like players like Johnny Newton last year. Newton didn't really show us much in terms of year one. So he's a player that's sitting on waivers most likely right now. I think that is a reality that you might face with some of these D tackles. Now, that being said,
Johnny did have an injury.
He did. I know. That being said, I think this D tackle class is talented enough that it's maybe worth, like, if you wanted to do it, like I could totally understand why they'd be slotting into this range for you in this class, because I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn and give any guys ahead of Nolen on your rankings away, but like I'm looking at players like Nolen and Derek Harmon in very similar ways because I think they have pass rushing upside from the interior. Not all of the D tackles do, but those two players in particular are guys that I'm keeping my eyes on at the very least, because I do think there is certainly some rushing upside with those two.
Okay, so who is your 15?
15 for me. This one, you have him higher because you said his name last week in the top 48. It's Demetrius Knight.
I do have him. I have him a lot higher.
Yeah. Do you want to wait?
I think we should wait.
Okay, we can wait, and I'll just tell. I'll be the bad guy later on.
No, that's all right. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so
that's what I've been doing with all of these flyer linebackers. I feel like, yeah, I kind of think this guy can't get off a block. So
yeah, Teddye Buchanan has a family, but go off. All right, so 14 for you. Is that where we are?
Yeah, 14. I have Nic Scourton.
Okay.
I
have Scourton at 12.
Okay. Hey, there we go.
We're
dialed in. We're back. So Scourton went to the Panthers. He went there in the second round, and I think that was, I don't know if it was higher than I expected him to go, but it felt good because I think we both were Nic Scourton fans during the season. This is another, really high motor player. A guy that, he's maybe oversized for a D end, 285, which is pretty big, but I don't think you necessarily notice that he's a big edge. He feels like he's very fluid. He's pretty quick. Like, he seems big, but he doesn't seem 285 big. Great spin move. He can convert speed to power really well. But he can also put a tackle on ice skates every once in a while. And yeah, I like that he went as high as he did. I like that he went to the Panthers because they are in desperate need of talent on that defensive line. I think they had Jadeveon Clowney back there was their best edge last year. Maybe I'm forgetting somebody, but
nope, you're not.
Okay. But yeah, it'll be nice to put some guys alongside Derek Brown, who's been trying to hold it down there basically on his own on that front.
Yeah, I like Scourton quite a bit. You said it. We kind of sung his praises earlier in the season as well. That last year Purdue in 2023, a 280 plus pound player hitting a spin move consistently. That was going to put his name on the radar for a lot of folks. And transferring to Texas A&M this year, it did not have the season that I think a lot of people expected, and that's why it was hard to gauge where he was going to go in the draft. I wouldn't have been surprised if he was end of the first round sort of guy or very top of round 2, but he does fall to 51. Maybe that was even higher because he is a player that, lacks the length, doesn't have extreme production from the edge position. So, but I think with Carolina, it's, incredibly easy to talk yourself into both him and the edge rusher they took in the 3rd round, which is not making our top 20s here today, which is Princely Umanmielen. But I think definitely both of these players deserve a star on the waivers because one of them is going to have a chance to produce. One of them is going to have the opportunity to seize hold of edge 1 for Carolina because that player is not on the roster right now. Yeah. Jadeveon Clowney was cut. DJ Wonham is the best remaining edge player. Right. And he's fine. He's okay.
You sure Gross Matos?
he's gone. So one of the worst defenses in NFL history was the 2024 Carolina Panthers. They needed serious help, and they took 2 edge players on day 2 to try to do that. So I like Scourton quite a bit. He's only 20 years old, so he is very much developmental while still showing you legitimate pass rushing tools and traits. So I think I'm in.
That's what happens when you let go of Jeremy Chin.
Yeah, it all falls apart.
House of cards.
All right. 14 for me is Danny Stutsman.
Okay.
So we covered that. 13 for you.
Mason Graham. Welcome back to interior D lineman. I'm assuming you don't have him.
Faded his ass. He's 21.
So I just thought, Mason Graham's a good player, so I should include him. And I like having good players here because he's going to stick around, I think, for a while in the league. And, if he can develop a good pass rush skill set and pair that with the elite run defense that he has, I think that he could just be one of those solid IDP guys. And if not, I still think he can contribute consistently as just a guy that cleans up against maybe not every week I can start Mason Graham, but against a heavy run team, I can start Mason Graham because if I'm playing the Ravens and they're going to be running in between the tackles, 23 times in this game, I can bet that Mason Graham's going to get 7 tackles and that's good enough. And then maybe he gets a half sack and you're good to go. So that's kind of where I'm at with Mason Graham is he's going to play the Ravens twice a year, but he's going to play a long time in the league. I'm guessing he's a good player. And it's just a guy that I want, again, a guy that I'd like to bet on to like keep improving on an already really good skill set.
Yeah, in formats where defensive tackles are required, obviously this is going to be a much higher priority for a lot of folks. For me, I'm again back to the conversation with Walter Nolen.
You're fat phobic.
Yes, I am. And you know what? I saw the rookie minicamp video and I was just like, nope. Any player who pukes is obviously bad.
Right. Giving so much effort, putting his body to the limit.
I just love, I was like, that video comes out and it's like, we traded Travis Hunter for this guy. What the hell? It's like,
cut to Travis Hunter dancing with his teammates.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I prioritize these later dart throw linebackers that I think have legitimate opportunities at production. That may come back and bite me because a player that goes 5th overall in Mason Graham might just be worth rostering and seeing what happens in terms of, can he develop as a pass rusher? That is a skill set that he is continuing to hone. Will he ever get there? And if he doesn't, maybe, like you said, he has enough of a run-stopping presence that he's getting enough tackles to be a relevant defensive lineman in a pinch. I don't think this is going to be your, DT1 for fantasy purposes ever, but maybe a player that is,
spot start guy.
Yeah, spot start guy.
Bye week,
I think about a player like Derek Brown, who's obviously a little bit bigger than Mason Graham, but like that is a player that is putting up tackle volume, and he's startable as a defensive lineman because of that tackle volume. So
Christian Wilkins is a similar type of archetype, if that's what you're looking for. The type of guy that's like, getting 5-6 tackles a game, and then like when he gets a sack, he's like in mid double digits, and that feels pretty good.
Yeah. So I totally understand having Graham higher on this list. So he's 21 though for me.
Oh, well, I thought you were saying his age is 21. That's why you left him off. No, I was like, that's not even that old.
Old. Where are we?
We're at 13.
13 for me is Mykel Williams.
Okay. I have him higher. I have him at 9.
Okay. So I have Scourton ahead of Williams, which is a choice, perhaps, if you are one of the people that's like, I just want to, for IDP, I'm just going to draft these defensive linemen based off of how they went in the draft. And that's completely fine. I understand why you'd want to do that. But to me, I think Williams is just a little bit more like, we're still waiting to see the full development.
He's a project.
Yeah. And I do hesitate to say the word project because I do think he is a player that is coming into the NFL like with the size, with the athleticism, with the run defense floor to be a solid starter immediately. The question is, can he develop into a legitimate pass rushing weapon for them across from Nick Bosa? And he certainly will be able to do that because that spot is currently just not filled, and it has not been filled for many years. It's why Leonard Floyd was somewhat fantasy relevant for a little while, because they were continuing to trot players like Leonard Floyd out there. So I think Mykel Williams will, has the chance and has the draft capital at 11th overall to be the guy. I mean, obviously they think he can be the guy. So I think, certainly a player that's, for me, fitting. This is now right at the tail end of a draft, high, like post round 4 for me. He's slotting into, if you have a 5th round, he's going to be right in those top few picks of the 5th round for me in this draft class. But I do have a few other edge players above him.
Yeah, I have a couple edge guys above him as well. It's definitely, he's a guy that like is a little bit of a dart throw for me, because I have him at a 9. Like I said, this would be somebody that you're probably taking, mid 4th. If you have a 4-round draft, it's a guy that like taking a chance. and seeing what happens, maybe throwing him on the taxi, because I don't think he's going to be a plug and play, for sure production player this year. And he absolutely could be, because he is a freak athlete and he was good last year at Georgia, but it's still a guy that is like pretty raw as a pass rusher. Like, we were talking about him this season as like, I don't really know exactly like what this player projects out to be. And while it became a little more clear as the season went on, we're still like a little bit, I don't know. But the 49ers, like, great place to sit and develop too, because they seem to work out defense. And I know the staffs have kind of rotated over and over, and like the reason that they were churning out so many good defensive linemen was a lot to do with D'Amico Ryans, who's not there anymore. But I still think like this 49ers defensive staff is quite good, and getting there to develop into a real pass rusher, like you said, across from Nick Bosa. So you're not getting any of those double teams. You're not getting offensive lines leveraging to your side. You're kind of getting that solo one-on-one. I think that's going to also be of huge benefit to him. So I'm excited to see how he develops.
Robert Saleh back in.
Yeah. Also, that
kind of that's exciting.
Well, D'Amico was their D-line coach under Saleh.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And Saleh, has a history with defensive lineman development there as well. So, and that, including the Jets. So, it is exciting. He's 20 years old as well. So I do like Mykel Williams. Like he's a fun player, an interesting player. He's banged up this last year too, so we didn't even get to see the full picture of what his final season at Georgia could have looked like. So he's fun. That's why I'm taking him here, potentially end of round 4 area of the draft.
D'Amico was their linebackers coach, not
there. It is.
Coach. Sorry, guys.
Makes sense.
Don't yell at me.
It makes a lot of sense.
It makes a ton of sense. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
It's okay. Number 12. Did you know?
Malaki Starks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you left him off because you hate everybody that's not a linebacker.
No, that's not true. He's higher.
Okay, good.
He's number 9.
Sick. So Malaki Starks went to the Ravens, just as we all thought. Ravens take good player. And Malaki Starks is a good player. No.
That's it.
No. Starks, one of my favorite defenders in the draft. The only reason he's this low is because there's question about like the actual fantasy role that he'll have. He's going to play a lot. He's going to be exciting to watch. He's going to be a plus on the defensive side of the ball. It's just going to be like how many like counting stats does he put up? And that's the big question with DBs. I think like he's a really effective run defender. I think one of his biggest weaknesses is that he's too eager as a run defender, that like he'll bite too hard on play action and then like leave behind. He's a safety. He can't do that. But when he's right, he's coming downhill pretty hard and putting a lick on a running back. And I think that he's a pretty good. He has like a pretty good punch because he has that speed and that like ferocity when he's coming downhill, that he can put a punch into a lead blocker and like kind of surprise him. Maybe like I don't know if he's like winning with strength, but I think like, oh, I got a DB coming up, and Starks kind of puts a little extra into it than they would expect. 4.35 was really nice to see. I mean, you can kind of tell he's so rangy, and then he also has the ability to get those splash plays. You see the highlights from Malaki Starks. Those are the kind of things that he could be putting together. Maybe getting you 5 picks on a season and being like, okay, yeah, just sprinkle those on top of whatever other production he can give me.
Yeah, I mentioned it last week. I did have him ranked in my top 48. I have him in the 3rd round. And like for a player that's projected to play free safety, that could be a little bit rich. But what I said last week is I'm just going to take players of this caliber at DB. Like there's a lot of ways that you can overthink DB in terms of who projects best in a box role, and that's going to work out sometimes. But sometimes it's really as easy as this is one of the best safeties period in the NFL, or can develop into for sure. And I think in this case, I look at a player like Ardarius Washington, who took over the free safety spot for the Ravens last year over the back half of the season, started 7 games for them in that role. I mean, Ardarius Washington was putting up 8.7 fantasy points per game. So, like, that's not a lot, but it's relevant. And that's Ardarius Washington. So think about a player like, yeah. I mean, he is back, by the way. He's on a 1-year tender. He's a restricted free agent. He's back. I don't think he's going to play a huge, obstacle in terms of Starks getting on the field this year, but we'll see how that works out. But long term, Starks taking over the free safety spot, with Kyle Hamilton there. I think there's enough to go around for both of these guys.
If you're worried about Ardarius Washington taking snaps from Malaki Starks, you should also be worried about Bo Melton taking snaps from Matthew Golden.
Yeah. Amen to that. All right. So number 11.
Number 11 for me is Jalon Walker.
Okay. He's number 10 for me.
Okay. So Jalon Walker, finally, the Falcons take an edge rusher. And take a good one. Walker is a really good athlete, has great bend, good first step. He is so strong at the point of contact, just drives people backwards. Another guy like this one, we had more questions about, of like, what is this player? And I think I said I liked him more as an off-ball linebacker than as an edge rusher, but like, he's quite good and that was more of like a, pick your poison rather than like,
well, and also his size. I mean, he's certainly not a prototypical edge player in terms of size.
Exactly. And so it was like, where do I want him to be? I'd rather have him be at off ball, but if they want him at on ball and play him as an edge player, by all means, I think he's good enough and he's a good enough athlete. And like, those projects have worked before. They haven't always worked, but I'm willing to bet that it'll work for this guy because he's got a high motor. He has, the tools in the tool chest to make it work, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's funny how the Falcons took an edge rusher finally and then loved it so much that they had to trade their 26th pick to do it again in the same first round. And we both have that player ranked higher on this list. At least I would assume you do as well. So, but I do like Walker a lot. I think he's lower on the list for me just because there are those questions about what exactly is this going to look like on this defense because of his size. And I think there is, still a world where he's kind of playing a hybrid position where he's playing off the edge, he's playing off the ball, he's kind of doing a lot of different things rather than just being a pure edge rusher for them. But I do think that's also not a bad thing. If he is a hybrid player, there's potentially opportunities for him to rack up a lot of different stats in that case. And for IDP, that would be very, exciting. He did lead Georgia in pressures last year. I mean, obviously we know Georgia's defense is every year a premier unit. And this year, this was the premier edge rusher for them. They're not getting a lot of total pressures, per individual on this defense because of how much rotation there is with these guys. But he had 34 pressures last year. That led the team. I think motor, you said it, that's there. Everything you read about the character is there. This is a future, captain in the making. He's made up of the right stuff. It's why he went 15th overall, despite having, lackluster size for an NFL edge player. But I think, I'm taking him in the 4th round of rookie drafts for me. He's where was he last week? He's 43rd for me in this class.
Hand up. Forgot James Pearce.
Oh, no way.
I was making my list and I was like, this feels a little high for James Pearce. And so I put him down at the bottom of my list to like pull him back in later and just forgot to pull him back in. And he's supposed to be higher, but he's not. My list as currently stands does not have James Pearce in it. And I feel bad. You're like, yeah, we both have another. And I was like, what? No, I don't. Who am I forgetting? Yeah, that's 100% on me. So whoops.
It's okay. Well,
I'll find a way to make this work.
We'll definitely we'll talk about James Pearce. It's not like we won't talk about him. He's here, but I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know. So what you're?
I know where I want to put him. I feel bad for Jahdae Barron that I hyped him up that he's going to be on the list and he's not.
Damn it. at least he got those 5 minutes or whatever it was. But, number 11 for me. Is that where we are?
I hope you're keeping track. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's got to be it because it's Shemar Stewart for me at 11.
Okay. I have Shemar Stewart at 10, which is now my 11. Same spot.
Look at that. So if you're keeping track of my list, at least in terms of how this is stacking out, and yours is very similar, I think, also at this point, where I have Jalon Walker at 10, I have Shemar Stewart at 11, I have Nic Scourton at 12, and I have Mykel Williams at 13. That's going to look a little bit interesting, I think, on the surface, because Mykel Williams is the highest drafted player out of that group, going at 11th overall. He's the lowest one here. I have a second round pick in Scourton sandwiched in the middle of Williams and Stewart, who I think have a lot of similar descriptors in the sense of they are developmental edge players that don't have, extreme college production backing them up. In Stewart's case, I'm just going to roll the dice that he has a higher rushing ceiling that is just not tapped into from his days at Texas A&M. I will say, everybody knows it at this point. I feel like if you care enough about the draft, you've heard this 4.5 career sacks number probably 100 times because that's where we are. He still went 17th overall to the Bengals despite not having almost any sack production backing him because he is an absolute freak of nature. Nicknamed the Menace, that also bumped him up a spot maybe on this list.
What number did he get?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see.
That could change things for me.
Shemar Stewart, I'm seeing 97.
I like that a lot.
I do like that. He was 4 at Texas A&M, so I know you'd have hated that.
Yeah, that's not right.
But 97 for Stewart. With everything going on with the Bengals right now, Trey Hendrickson, literally just today, more news is coming out that there's bad blood. It doesn't seem like that situation is getting resolved ever. So they certainly need a player like Stewart to step up in a big way, potentially as soon as this year, and show that this is the next era of edge rushing for the Bengals. Myles Murphy, that was a player we talked about a couple of years ago. That never worked out. Stewart, going to be a similar type of a player. Very big, very athletic. Of course, Stewart is a more athletic version of Myles Murphy. Like, he is the better prospect, certainly. So I do think he can develop for them into the edge one of the future. I don't think he's there today, which is why he's a little bit further down on this list for me. But I think that player is certainly in there.
Yeah, this is what Trey Hendrickson said today at his press conference. He said of his decision to start speaking up publicly. I'm a Floridian, so there's an unprovoked shark attack and there's provoked shark attacks. The comments that are being made, whatever happened at the combine, whatever happened at owners' meetings, and the text I got yesterday, it's not something where I'm just twiddling my thumbs and thinking, how can I get the next one up? I don't know what that means. What does that have to do with the shark attack?
What?
Are you saying you're going to attack the shark first? I feel like that's a bad idea. I feel like you should get out of the water. I don't think you're going to win that one, Trey. But I don't think. He also said that it's become personal. I don't think he's playing for the Bengals. So
that's what it seems like.
It feels like this is opening up to be a pretty, open path for Shemar if he can take it to be their number one edge player. And like you said, freak of nature. It does, he's versatile. He can play all over the line, which is really helpful for a defensive line that needs a lot of help in a lot of different places, that he can kind of slot in on different rush sets in different places. So definitely excited about what this player can bring to a Bengals defense that needs help.
Do we know your number 10?
Mykel Williams.
Okay. And my number 10 is Jalon Walker. So your number 9?
Donovan Ezeiruaku.
That's my number 8.
There we go. So Ezeiruaku is he went to the Cowboys, which I liked a lot. That's another spot that we've been waiting for someone to be across from Micah Parsons to take a little bit of attention away from him, because it seems like he's been struggling a little bit to create space with the entire D-line, having nobody to focus on other than him. And like DeMarcus Lawrence was productive there in his old age. And so I think having somebody as talented as Ezeiruaku, who is like, has a deep bag of like, it looks like a seasoned vet when he's like stringing together pass rush moves. His pretty good bend also, on top of having a good set. It has great length, good size. And so I'm excited to see, these guys work across from each other, and Parsons not having to, force all of the quarterback pressures on his own.
Yeah, I like Ezeiruaku a lot. I don't know why he fell in the draft. I'm not entirely sure. It seemed like he, could have been a first-round pick and not even a low one at points in the process, and I was on board with that. He ended up going 44, so not super late into round 2, but enough. And the Cowboys got a great value at that spot. It's why they were sort of looked at as one of the better drafts among the entire league, is because they were able to string together some picks, get Ezeiruaku there at 44. 14 sacks last year, true breakout season, 60 pressures, one of the most productive pass rushers in college football. And like you said, the opportunities are certainly there, because DeMarcus Lawrence, it was 32 or 33 last year. He didn't play a ton for them. He is also now gone. The rusher not named Micah Parsons that played the most for them was Chauncey Golston, who actually had the most pass rush snaps for them last year, which is interesting. He had 7 sacks. He's also gone. They brought in a few flyers with Dante Fowler Jr. and Peyton Turner, but I mean, I don't foresee either of those players standing in the way of Ezeiruaku, like getting snaps early. They do have Marshawn Nealand, who they drafted last year. He was okay last year as well. So, I mean, there's names in the room. I don't expect necessarily that Ezeiruaku comes in and is like immediately the starter across from Parsons, but long term, I would be shocked if he wasn't. And I think he certainly has the talent to be very IDP relevant as a defensive lineman.
Yeah, I think you'll see him majority like third downs passing situations. He's still a little light. He's a 248, which like pretty small still for an edge player. Not very polished, I think, as a run defender. I think he could definitely use some work in that sense too. So I think you'll see him a lot in passing situations. And then as he becomes more, accustomed to playing in the NFL and playing against playing run defense, and I think you'll start to see him more and more, and he'll become more and more relevant with the more snaps that he plays.
Number 8 for you,
Mike Green,
and he's number 4 for me.
Yeah. So Mike Green to the Ravens in the second round. I feel like I should be higher on Mike Green, but you kind of scared me away from him. I don't know if that was a tactic of yours, but
what do you mean?
You're like, oh, Mike Green, the legal stuff,
Well,
he's kind of very valid. But without getting into that, Mike Green is an incredibly versatile pass rusher. He just like wins in so many different ways. And again, like goes to the Ravens, which is another one of these guys. It's like, oh, hey, another good player went to the Ravens. Shocker. Also like a motor guy. Like we've talked about motor with a lot of these players. Like there is not a rep where Mike Green takes it easy, I don't think. And the change of direction is really impressive. Like you see some of these guys that are like chasing down like Kyler Murray in the backfield and just like can't, like I feel like Mike Green can handle that. He feels like Drew Holiday. Like he gets back there and he starts to like mirroring you, and you're just kind of dead to rights. And it just like it feels like almost natural for him to be a pass rusher. Like this is what it was meant to be. And so here we are.
No player had more sacks in college football last year than Mike Green, and that includes the college football playoff. So Marshall obviously was not a part of that, and still Mike Green led the nation with 17 sacks. I mean, you said it. He is an artist. He's already a pass rush artist. We talked about that on 2.0. I mean, it was shocking digging into his film. This guy from Marshall that's, leading the league in sacks. And well, guess what? He's doing that for a reason because he knows what he's doing out there. Now, of course, there is the other side of it, which is he ended up at Marshall because he was dismissed from Virginia. And those questions resurfaced at the combine. And it seems as though the NFL was not comfortable enough with his background to take him where his talent suggests that he could have gone, which was early in the first round. So the fact that he fell to the Ravens in the second round is concerning because it seems as though 32 NFL teams had reservations about his background. And so there is that like dark cloud hanging over this player. And I truly hope that, whatever happened in his past, I hope that is in the past, because I would love to see Mike Green doing what he does at the NFL level for a very long time. And so I have him at number 4 because I just believe in the talent. The draft spot is not indicative of the talent per se, so I'm ranking him up there amongst the best of the best.
Yeah, I respect it.
Number 7 for you.
Yeah, did you do your number 8?
Number 8 for me is Ezeiruaku.
Okay. Number 7 for me is James Pearce, who I didn't forget about.
He's number 5 for me.
Okay. So James Pearce, what a ride it's been here at Camp Dynasty for James Pearce. Started out at IDP 1 for us at the beginning of the year, and kind of were hanging on to that for most of the year. I'd say we were trying not to be reactionary on the season as a whole, and just kind of came to a point where it was like, I just don't see a ton of growth from last year to this. If he feels a little stiffer than he should be, it felt like he just had a little more juice before this year. Like it felt a little disappointing, but looking back, it was also like, I can't believe he went like 26 to the Falcons, who need pass rusher, like we just talked about with Jalon Walker. So while maybe there are some questions about like, what exactly is this player as like a long-term piece, or like what exactly, or maybe not as a long-term piece, maybe more so as a short-term piece. Like, what is this player coming to the league right now? And I don't know, but I think that he has a ton of tools, and like the player that he was coming into this year, especially with the frame and the athleticism that he has, is like really tantalizing. Really a guy that like you feel like you can mold into a dominant sort of edge player, because he has that stuff on tape that still really wows you and really like kind of sits you back in your chair like, oh man, that's impressive. But it's also here and there, it feels like I don't love those reps out of James Pearce.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this was our number one IDP to start the year, and I think I've hung on to it a little bit. I mean, obviously he fell in the draft, but he's still up here at number 5 for me because I do still believe in his talent. This year was not, obviously did not go how we expected in terms of production. I mean, he had 8 sacks. That was after a 13 sack season in which he was playing in a very similar role. I mean, they were rotating guys and they continued to rotate guys at Tennessee over the last couple of years. I mean, Pearce had more pressures than 2023 this year, 55 versus 52. The sack production just fell off a little bit. The pass rush win rate was still pretty good this year. So there wasn't like a ton of red flags in terms of the film. I think a lot of that came after the season when you started to get reports about his character and like, you know, he is a player that has a little bit more of that slight slender frame. So there's already that working against him. And then you threw that in the mix and it was like, man, is he really not going to go in the first round? Well, the Falcons obviously identified this player as one of the top players on their board in order to make the move that they did, shipping a 26 first to get back in to take him. So I still have a lot of belief in him, and they obviously had a lot of belief in him, so I do as well. I think we both have him here above Jalon Walker because I think both of us probably are in agreement that he's just a better pass rusher today than Jalon Walker, and I think he can continue to develop from this point forward and continue to be a better pass rusher than Jalon Walker. But, you know, ideally both of these guys kind of bring a new era of you know, pass rush to Atlanta, which has been sorely needed for a very long time. And they're both fantasy relevant, but I'm still taking Pearce.
Yep.
All right. So number 7 for me is Nic Emmanwori.
Okay. I'm at 5.
So mentioned this a little bit last week. He was in my top 48. He was in the 3rd round, top-ish of the 3rd round for me. And obviously a lot of that has to do with the fact that the ceiling of Emmanwori is very tantalizing. Like, I think there is a world in which this is one of the top dynasty DBs, period, because of his skill set. I mean, you saw it this last year at South Carolina. He had 90 total tackles with only 7% missed tackle rate, to go along with 4 interceptions. I believe 1, maybe 2 of those were pick sixes. At least one of them was, I know for sure. But it's because, you know, he has the athleticism. When he gets a takeaway, he can turn it upfield and just burn and turn those interceptions into pick sixes. So I think the skill set is very alluring. The athleticism is obviously kind of what put him on the map after the combine. Everybody stopped and said, holy shit, I can't believe the numbers this guy just put up. And then he goes to the perfect spot in Seattle. And that's the biggest part of this for me, is that you can really envision him in this Mike Macdonald defense becoming that player that you really want him to be. The opportunity is available there. The strong safety spot is wide open at this point for them. And I think he has the tools to develop into that, I'm going to say it, Kyle Hamilton-esque player in this defense, a la McDaniels days in Baltimore. I'm not going to say, you know, this is the level of talent we're dealing with. I'm not going to say he reaches that pinnacle, but this is certainly the mold of that player that can move all around this defense and be a fantasy weapon.
If you weren't going to say it, I was going to say it. So I'm
okay,
glad you
thank
did.
God, because you're the biggest Kyle Hamilton fan, and I didn't know if that was like sacrilege to say.
No,
that.
no, we're good. I wish he would have gone 33 instead of just 3 on the Seahawks defense to channel Jamal Adams. I don't know if that's good juju or bad juju at this point, but he had a lot of good years there. But yeah, that is why I have him so high, is because he went into this defense with Mike McDonald, and he is going to be used all over the place. And like you said, I was super high on Kyle Hamilton. I feel similarly. Like, I don't think Emmanwori is as good as Kyle Hamilton. I think, like, in coverage wise, Hamilton, was he was a generational type of safety prospect. I think, like, that's turned into him being a really good player. Emmanwori, I think, is more of like the freak athlete that covers up some of his gaffes with his athleticism, and that translates him into being a linebacker size player that plays safety. And like, that is, I think Mike McDonald is like drooling over being able to use this guy in all levels of his defense, and having him and Witherspoon on this defense is probably just like a wet dream for defensive coordinators, because like, you can literally do whatever you want and then just like reap the benefits. So I'm just really excited to see how he's used, and like what I don't know exactly what the counting stats are going to look like. And like, maybe it's worse than we're talking about, 5 overall, 7 overall for IDPs. And like, I have him at 30, I think, in my top 48. You have him a little lower than that. And it's just like, I think that's about right. Take a flyer on him, end of the second round, top of the third round, middle of the third round. Like, that feels fine, and just like kind of see what happens. So I'm really excited to see what this guy does and like how they use him, because it should be in a lot of variety.
Number 6 for you. Do we know this one?
We do. Demetrius Knight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
Been
right.
waiting a while.
All right, so let's do it. He was 15 for me, but go ahead.
All right.
That was not
targeted. All right.
It was a long time ago.
So Demetrius Knight went to the Bengals, 17th pick of the second round. He's a traditionally sized linebacker, 6'2", 245. He is pretty like, he's a good athlete. He's got a really good first step, shoots gaps really well, good instincts as a blitzer. He knows, like, has great timing, and like I said, that acceleration, that first step, can really deliver him some clean looks coming in on blitzes at the quarterback. He can lay the boom. That's the biggest benefit of being a true 245-pound linebacker, is guys usually don't go forward when he hits them. So that's always nice, is those, like, that stops metric that you brought up. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure he has plenty of them. Good speed, sideline to sideline. He's not like the most agile player, I wouldn't say, but when he's going in a straight line, he's pretty fast, and I think he's pretty solid in coverage also. So while I do think there's a little bit of a lack of opportunity this year as like a plug and play, I want Demetrius Knight to be in my linebacker spot this year, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think as soon as next year, if some space opens up in that linebacker room, you could see him getting some real snaps.
Yeah, and this is, I admit I will be an outlier with Knight. I think where you have him at number 6 is going to be much more common. If you're looking at other IDP rankings, you're going to see him higher on the list like this, because he was a second round pick. He went 49th.
Are you calling me a normie? Saying I don't do the work?
Okay, Chalky, just pull up a list and just put it. No, it
copied and paste Fantasy Pros IDP ranking.
Yeah. No, I'm just prepared to be wrong here. And it's because of a few different things. First of all, like, he's 25 years old, and I will just be an ageist until the day I die with Dynasty. 4 years at Georgia Tech, 1 year at Charlotte, and then finally ends up at South Carolina, has a good year, and gets drafted 49th overall. It's a great story. It's cool. I do think he was overdrafted, but that's just my opinion. But he will be 25 years old. And that is not something that is entirely exciting to me when based off what you just said, when you ended the conversation, which is he is not in a position to get clear snaps this year. I mean, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are there. Pratt is, I don't know what's happening with that. I mean, this team is bungling all of their defensive.
Well, yeah, when you pay Burrow, Chase, and T. Higgins,
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah, we can make it work, and then everybody else just can't get paid.
Right. So, I mean, maybe the Pratt situation falls apart enough that Knight can get on the field this year, but it's just hard for me to sell myself on a 25-year-old linebacker with one season, like really one season of legitimate production in college. And even then it was fine. It was a fine year. Turn on the tape. I mean, I'm with you. I like the size. I like the knockback power. It's definitely there. Exceptional short area burst. That is something that really pops off the screen with Knight. Given his size, he has closing speed that is legitimately impressive, but I'm just not entirely sold on him as a long-term IDP asset, and therefore I just have him lower on this list.
Telling him, get a job.
Yeah, get a job and get ready to
doing?
learn career, buddy. And it's not in the league.
What if I told you that he was a high school quarterback?
I mean, I like that.
Yeah.
Instincts,
Right.
know the game. Hey, Teddye Buchanan, same deal. He was a quarterback. So
There you go.
Works for linebackers, I guess. But I'll be wrong about Demetrius Knight. We'll revisit that at some point in the future, I'm sure.
It'll be 28 when we revisit it. Only 3 years from now.
Well, how about another linebacker? Because my number 6 player is Carson Schwesinger.
He's my number 4.
We talked about so if you're keeping up, if you listen to last week's episode, this is already a change. I've already changed my final rankings. So in my defense,
need to put the asterisk, final asterisk rankings.
Yes. In my defense, though, I understood that the JOK injury was very bad. I did not, admittedly, I did not understand that it was potentially career ending. And based off of the fact that we got a statement from him literally yesterday that said he is not playing this year, and it did not appear that like there was a commitment for the future of football for him, I think the door to him like not playing NFL football again is certainly open. So in that case, I do think Schwesinger like deserves to be high on this list. Like you talked about it last week when you talked about the player. The opportunity was there, JOK or not. No JOK, like the door is open for him to become that player on this defense. The player that JOK developed into and became and showed signs of last year before the injury, where he was becoming an IDP superstar before our eyes. And then tragically that was taken away from him and from us. So Schwesinger, I believe, has the talent to play that sort of a role, coverage ability, run stopping ability. Yes, he was playing a little bit smaller, and there's going to be some unforgiving reps on his college film when he's getting handled by blockers. But man, he came in at the combine. Here's a player that legitimately put on weight and showed up to the combine over 240 pounds. I'm excited to see what that looks like for him in the NFL, because that's not what he was playing at UCLA.
Yeah, I am definitely. He was playing around like 225 at UCLA, and that's why we were, when we talked about him, if you were with us back then, is like kind of like maybe a tweener, like a pretty good coverage player that gets up, gets dirty, and makes a lot of plays. But I don't really know exactly what this looks like. But when we both said like he didn't really lose a step adding those 15 pounds either. Like he still looked every bit as athletic as he did in that tape at LSU. And so it's like, man, a guy with high football IQ, a guy that's a good athlete that can cover, but also can come up and makes a lot of like good sound tackles, sideline to sideline range. He does a lot of things really well and can fill that role that's going to be left open by JOK's absence, which is just as kind of like jack of all trades that it has to fly around and make a ton of plays. Because also, like, there's not really another guy on the second level that's going to be able to make those plays for the Browns. So he's going to have to be it.
Number 5.
Emmanwori.
Okay, and that's James Pearce for me. Number 4.
Schwesinger.
And that's Mike Green for me. So we have reached the top 3.
Yeah, we did. And they should be the same, I'd imagine.
They should be the same. So number 3, Jihaad Campbell.
That's right.
Because if you're counting, if you're realizing here, we are including a certain player as an IDP in this episode. And
yes,
it will be no surprise that he is on top. So Jihaad Campbell is number 3 for us here. I will go back to what I said last week. I did have him in the second round. He was my number 18 player. I do think it's interesting that they're talking about him as an edge rusher first, or at least that was the last report I saw right after the draft, is that the Eagles looked at him that way. That does, like, I won't say concern me, but like, when you thought about him as a pure linebacker with this level of athleticism and the flashes you saw in that position at Alabama this last year, I think that was what was really exciting about Campbell. But that being said, if he's splitting time between both positions or even like focusing on the edge position for them, like, he's a good enough player that I don't really even care. Like,
I was going to say, I think I'm down.
Yeah.
I think like whatever they end up doing with him is probably going to be the right thing to do with him, because, like, again, this is another one of those teams, the Eagles, that feels like they just kind of know what they're doing with their player development, their player acquisition. It feels like they understand what the team needs and how to fill those needs correctly. And if they think Jihaad Campbell is good as a like combo linebacker, and he's going to play like on ball 60% of the time and off ball 40% of the time or whatever, like, I trust them with what their evaluation of Jihaad Campbell is, because they have him in the room and like they have him at the rookie mini camp, and they're going to have him at training camp, and they're going to try him at both, because you can guarantee they're going to give him every chance to succeed at both positions as possible. But I'd rather have him play off ball for fantasy purposes, because I think that he'll rack up a ton of stats, and like fill that Nakobe Dean spot until Dean is back. But if you're thinking as like an Eagles GM, if you're like, if our future looks like Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean, and maybe it doesn't, then you want to be able to slot Jihaad Campbell across from like Nolan Smith next to Jalen Carter. Like, you feel pretty good about that. But if your future is, we're going to move on from Nakobe Dean because Jihaad Campbell is so good off ball, then you have that flexibility as well. Like, I feel like it just grants you so many more ways forward as the Eagles, because Jihaad Campbell is so versatile. So I'm good with whatever they want to do, because I feel like Jihaad Campbell is good enough to adapt to do it all.
Jihaad Campbell playing edge, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. live.
Are we back?
Are we back? All right, number 2. It's goes without saying, I think. I've really enjoyed breaking down the depth of this IDP class, because that's not something we get to do throughout the season. Most of the time, we kind of wait until this point. A player that we have broken down from the summer until right now is the player that pure IDP wise, from a pure IDP perspective,
no gimmicks.
No gimmicks, is the best one in this class, and that is Abdul Carter.
Yeah, we made it full circle of, hey, the guy is interesting. He's playing, edge this year. He played linebacker last year at Penn State. Maybe he's a little Micah Parsons-ish. We'll see. He's even wearing number 11. And then it come full circle, and it's like, yeah, Micah Parsons is my comp for this player because he's a freak. And then he, goes third overall to the Giants, and you can expect him to, be the guy. He feels so secure in his ability that he asked Lawrence Taylor for his number. Like, that's how good he was last year. If that doesn't put it into perspective, I don't know if anything will, but he truly developed into a dynamic pass rusher that has this freakish set of, athletic skills on top of a repertoire that he put together in under a year. So you do that and add in, NFL coaching, you probably turn this guy into, Mentos and a bottle of Diet Coke and send him at the O-line.
I like that. That's the sleeper nickname right there. But so that Abdul Carter is a first round player for both of us.
Yep.
He was number 11 for me. I can't remember where he was sitting exactly for you last week.
He is at number 11 for me also.
So number 11's all around for Abdul Carter. But in this case, when we are talking about IDP, you cannot talk about this IDP class without talking about a player that will be playing cornerback at least part of the time, or so it may seem as of today, which is Travis Hunter. So we obviously talked about Hunter last week. We had this conversation. I have him as my number 2 overall player because of this dual nature of his game. Did not move him to number 1. I think there is a conversation, and there are some people out there that would put Travis Hunter at number 1 in an IDP league under the assumption that he will be a wide receiver and a good one at that in your DB spot. So I don't think those people are necessarily wrong. I think that conversation is very valid. It's something I've thought a lot about. You and I were not there, but from an IDP perspective, this is certainly unlike anything we have ever encountered before.
Yeah, this is, truly gonna might break the IDP format of where I've said this before, commissioners might have to make an unwritten rule. I guess it would be a written rule then, where you have to start Travis Hunter at wide receiver because he's too good at the cornerback position. And if you're in an IDP only league, this is a smash, the most obvious 101 I think ever, because Travis Hunter, he's going to be getting at least 12 points a game just from being a receiver. And then you're going to that's already DB1 just with 12 points per game. And then God forbid he scores a touchdown and gets a couple tackles. It's going to be a truly an anomaly. And imagine he has a 120-yard 2-touchdown game, and he's just the guy you're playing has 33 points coming out of his DB spot. I'm gonna be sick to my stomach playing against him. And that's the kind of guy you want to take really high in your rookie drafts, is the guy that's going to make everybody afraid when they see him in your lineup.
Yeah, that's the thing that really I think if we knew for certain that Travis Hunter would be a DB eligible player for the entirety of his career, I do think he is the number 1 overall player in this class. I think if you had the security to say he will always be DB eligible, that's how you take him first overall in this class. I think we talked about it last week. Without that security, this could literally just go away next year. And I think in that case, yeah, he's probably still going to be a really good wide receiver, worthy of a top 3 pick in Dynasty. but is he worth going over Ashton Genty? And you and I say no.
Right.
So that's how we arrive there. And that's, it is a debate that will continue, I think, amongst IDP players throughout this entire season and beyond, because we don't exactly know what it will look like yet. However, I do want to bring this up. We teased it all the way back at the beginning of the episode. If you're still here, hello, thanks. If you have a league in which cornerback, not DB, but cornerback is an essential requirement, if you are required to start a cornerback, as the commenter 18 Fearless he's playing in a league where you have to start 2 cornerbacks, which is just insane to me. Like
Jahdae Barron's on the board.
You were playing hardcore IDP, and I love it. Jahdae Barron is gone already, but in that case, does that change the argument for you?
So in Fearless's comment, he also says he starts 3 running backs, which also changes the calculus a little bit, because most leagues start 2 running backs. Team comp, he has Kamara, Pollard, Hubbard, and Swift for running backs, which, hey, it's not great, Fearless. I'm sorry. Like that's a little sketchy. Keyshawn Nixon not Kellen Moore. That's an offensive coordinator. Kenny Moore are both good corners, I would say, to have. But Keyshawn Nixon's not returning kicks anymore, so I don't know if that factors in. Man, it's a great question. I feel like I would almost just want to have Travis Hunter. Like, you kind of just have the cheat code at corner, because what are you going to do? Draft, let's say Jahdae Barron later in your draft and have a guy that's going to get you a floor of 6 points. And I don't even know if that's floor, but just as hypothetically, or you could just have Travis Hunter and never think about your cornerback position again for the next 8 years. I feel like that feels like plus EV versus, taking Genty, which is awesome, and having Genty and having a really good running back. But I feel like the leg up you get at the cornerback position feels like such a bigger leg up than you could get when you could get Joe Mixon as a rental and get 16 points a game out of him for 2 seconds, and I know the allure of Ashton Genty is so much, but when you have specifically a cornerback position, it feels like just this, by the tiniest hair of a bit, I would want Hunter.
Yeah, man, I think my answer is the same.
Yeah,
because I think whether it's DB, whether it's cornerback, you don't know. You don't know that he's going to always be able to start there. I do think the cornerback element of it is very interesting, because of the fact that obviously cornerback is not as productive in most cases for fantasy. I am looking at the leaderboard from last season right now amongst DBs. I'm curious to know if Brian Branch is eligible at cornerback for cornerback leagues that differentiate, because Brian Branch was the number 2 DB last year. He had over 200 points. So I would think he's a cornerback eligible player. But if you have cornerbacks out there that are scoring over 200 points already, then, okay, maybe it's not quite as, significant as it seems. Now, that being said, it drops off pretty quick. You have Alontae Taylor at 173, and then and then it just continues to spiral from there into the 160s, 150s. So I do think there's an argument for sure, but honestly, I think especially in this specific case where you're starting 3 running backs, I think you're just taking Genty either way.
I respect it. I think you can't go wrong either way. When you're on the clock, do what your heart tells you. I lean, by the smallest amount, Travis. Sounds like Austin leans a little bit more than that to Genty.
There it is. IDP rankings 2025. Over the course of our discussion, I think we touched on like 24-ish IDPs, so more than 20. That pretty much covered all of my honorable mentions, I think. Do you have any players that you want to shout out?
Jahdae Barron just barely didn't make it. The listed 21. No.
Yeah.
I think we covered everybody.
Yeah. I'll give the DBs a little love since I didn't do that here really at all besides the top two, but I mentioned it earlier. Kevin Winston Jr. is a player that I'm intrigued by. There's opportunity there in Tennessee. He's a player that can play downhill. He can play in the box. So I'm looking at Kevin Winston Jr. as a DB to keep my eyes on here with this class. But outside of that, yeah, we covered it. I mean, there's a lot of players. A lot of these players are just going to sit on the watch list, I think, this year. But that's how this works with IDP. Keep them close and make sure the second anything happens, the report drops, then make sure they end up on your roster before somebody else's. But all right, well, we have one true episode, I would say, left. One episode that is entirely devoted to speaking about the 2025 rookie class, and that is sleepers next week. Everybody's favorite topic in fantasy football, trying to find the guys later in the draft that will change your team, a la Bucky Irving last season. Who will that be this year? We will explore that. Potentially sleeper court may be back open for business next year. We will see if we can find a judge that's on duty, but look out for that. But so if you enjoyed our discussion though on IDPs, I love this episode because we just really don't get to talk enough about them through the year, all devoted to this position group, these three position groups, which are very important for us here because we play the game where they score the points for us. So if you enjoyed this discussion, top 20 IDPs, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty. If you are watching on YouTube, hello, thanks for being here. Make sure you hit subscribe and like the video before you leave because it very much helps us out. And if you are on the pod feed, like, rate, review, subscribe, all of those podcasty things because that helps us out a bunch as well.
RIP Jason Tatum.
Oh man, that is brutal. That is absolutely brutal. Achilles, man, they're popping everywhere. It seems like these days,
popping like flies.
Oh God, oh Jesus. On that note, thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.